they had framed what a person who had been assaulted or been abused, they fit in this box, and if you present in this box and you behave yourself and you do this and you nod here and you tick here, then you stand a chance of getting some justice. And if you didn't fit, then chances are you weren't going to get the box ticked. So I think their intention was to support survivors and victims, but you had to fit in this nice, neat little box. And when people have been assaulted and abused, they're traumatized, they're overwhelmed, they're not able to show up in a neat, tidy box. That's just not how it works. So the system doesn't work. I did report the sexual assault from my uncle because my parents said that's what I had to do. But I actually didn't want to, because I didn't feel it would be necessary, because I was sure that he would just say sorry and I'd never have to see him again, and that would be the end of it. So, but I was made to report it.
I did not report. This happened in 1990, and in the state of North Carolina, there was literally no crime that a woman could be charged with regards to sexual assaults. So there was no point in reporting. And obviously, in 1990, there were a lot of really regressive, backwards thinking about sexual assault. Almost no resources for men, and literally nothing if the female was a perp.
So after the police came and took my statement, they went to my flat and took all of my bedding. They took all of my clothes from me. They took all of his clothes. They went round to his house and arrested him and took his clothes from him. And they did get forensic evidence from my sheets, because he told the police that he didn't even come into my bedroom and never even sat on my bed, let alone went in my bed and underneath the covers. But the forensic evidence showed, because he was wearing his jeans and t-shirt when he got into my bed, that there was an equal number of fibers from his jeans and an equal number of fibers from his t-shirt on my bottom sheet, which would indicate that he was lying in my bed underneath the covers, when he had said he hadn't even come into my bedroom, let alone sat on my bed, let alone in my bed. So they did have forensic evidence. And weirdly, the one thing I look back on, because his defense managed to argue something, I wish that they had asked for fibers from his socks. I don't know why, because that, for me, that would have proved that he was sort of lying down, shoes off type of thing in my bed. But I wish they had tested for the fibers of the socks. For some reason, I feel that might have helped me. It probably wouldn't.
So there was no forensic exam for my particular assault. Had there been, they would have gotten her DNA off of me. They would have been able to take the sheets from the hotel room. They would have proven that she had been in my car as well. But since that wasn't something they would have even entertained, given the fact that they couldn't even charge her, let alone arrest her or put it in a courtroom. None of that went forward. But yeah, there would have been DNA evidence. That would have been something that would have been able to be collected, but nothing was collected because I didn't go to the police, because I knew that I was, one, going to be laughed at, and two, they were literally going to do nothing.
Not seeing justice after everything that happened in the court case and them finding evidence to prove that he was in my bed, and still not finding justice because my character was called into question as a witness because I was an unstable young teenager, really just taught me that there was no point. When bad things happened to me, my life spiraled out of control after that, and it just got worse and worse, and I got more into more and more unsafe situations, which led me to be further abused by other people. And it just taught me there was no point saying anything to anyone about anything, and that if bad things happened to me, that's just what happened. That's what it taught me, certainly in the early sort of 5 to 10 years following it happening to me. I think that's what it taught me.
Since there was no ability for me to pursue justice, and at the time the messages sent to male survivors were shake it off, walk it off. If the perp was a woman, that means you wanted it. You should want it. You should always want sex. What I've done is thrown a lot of that emotion and energy into helping survivors in this day, helping make things better for people going forward in ways that didn't exist for me back then. So I can't do anything about what she did. She gets a free pass on that for life. What I can do is work with others and raise awareness and be there for survivors who are going through something now, whether they're choosing to go through the legal system or they just need help finding resources so that they can heal.
For me, there were a few hard parts that came through that whole seeking to get justice and not getting it. Some of the things that I was told at the time were really unhelpful. So a comment by a policeman at the time saying to me, because he hadn't raped me and hadn't ejaculated inside of me, it would be harder to prove, because sexual assault cases were harder to prove than rape cases. So that was a really difficult thing for me to hear, because it felt to me like I'd have been better off if something worse had happened to me in that moment. And then the injustice in the courtroom when the verdict came back as not guilty, which was not based solely on evidence, but because my character was brought into question as a witness, because my life was so unstable at the time. And the person defending me said to me, we should ask for a retrial because some of the things said in that room need to be discounted and you need to sit in front of a fresh jury, because these things that they've said are about your life now, not about what was going on then. But obviously it brings enough doubt into a jury's mind that they can't sentence somebody, so we should request a retrial. But I just refused it. I'd lost all hope, and I'd gone through 2 years of physical and verbal abuse from people that he had convinced I was making this up, and I just couldn't take anymore. And I never really wanted that to happen anyway in the first place. All I ever wanted was for him to just say sorry and then to just never see him again. So the whole process was pretty traumatic, really, and not a process I ever really wanted to go down.
Not seeing justice was definitely difficult as I got a little bit older and realized that what had happened was really foul and really wrong. And she manipulated a lot of things in order to get what she wanted. And it was having to deal with people's idiocy still today on this topic makes it even harder. I still get questioned, why didn't you report? What part of it wasn't illegal in 1990 is hard for people to understand still, but I keep having this explanation that people just don't seem willing to accept, because they seem to think that things have always been exactly the same forever, and they don't understand that a lot of us had to raise a lot of hell to make changes that they see now today, and changes that they have now today, resources that are available to them today, are because other people had to fight because nothing was there. So that is frustrating. Historical revisionism is a real thing. And just keep focusing my energy on what I can do now, and have to kind of like compartmentalize what I couldn't do.
Know that I will never get justice through the legal system in the way that I initially tried to get justice. That I know that won't happen. And weirdly, I did actually call a couple of years ago to see if I could do the case again, because Emma showing up now is a very different witness to Emma showing up then, who was traumatized, emotionally all over the place and didn't know what she was doing. And I do feel like if Emma today was to show up and, you know, stand in my truth, they wouldn't be able to pull me apart as a witness in the same way that they did, because my life isn't chaotic like it was back then, because I've had time to heal and I'm not in that traumatized place. So I think there's a long way to go for people, victims who are in trauma, who are having to testify. I think the awareness is a bit better now, but, you know, I think the understanding of what trauma does to someone and how they then present, it needs a lot of understanding by people in a court setting. But so I won't get it in a court setting, but what I do feel, and this is just through feedback, is that at the time he was so loved by so many people and so well thought of, and he was amazing and I was the pits. I was just the dirt on the bottom of someone's shoe in terms of comparison of human beings and how we were thought of in the town. And now I've had people come back to me and say, I'm really sorry I didn't, you know, believe you at the time. And we can see what he's like now, and we can see that he has gone and hung around with younger girls, and then, you know, why is he in a bar with someone in their teens? He keeps getting older but the girl's age stays the same, type of thing, you know. So I've had people now come back to me and they see things through a different lens. And for me, I suppose that is justice, in as much as, I don't know, maybe things do always just kind of have a way of coming out in the end, you know. So I just sort of have faith in that, and me stepping away from trying to prove anything is protecting my energy, and he will show himself for himself with or without me there. That's what I think.
For me, I don't see justice happening. It would require changes to the statutes that would have to be retroactive, which are really, really, really difficult to get past. They couldn't make something a crime retroactively without a really, really hard fight in the legislature. On top of the fact that, of course, there was no forensic evidence collected. As a male victim and with the female perp, the likelihood of them believing anything is very, very small. I was a 19-year-old Marine. She was about 25, and she was local, and I was stationed at the base. They wouldn't put any energy whatsoever into documenting it. They certainly wouldn't care, even if they believed it was true. They wouldn't put any energy into doing anything, because I should just be happy and like it, and it was attention from a woman, and all men want that all the time, regardless of how it comes, is the belief system. So yeah, that's not ever going to happen, which is why I just keep redirecting any of those feelings and thoughts and energy into what I can do now to change things going forward. So she got me for one night, but survivors get me now going forward.
For me, it's has to be me going on and having a good life and doing good with all of the learnings that I've had, good, bad, other, and uglier, whatever. Me going on and doing good with all of the learnings that I have had in my life. And that to me is triumph, if you like, and nothing to do with the legal system. But the more I have concentrated on my own healing, my own work, and actually sitting in how I feel and working through that, the more empowered I've become. And the more in the past, when I look back, when that whole court case was going on and I was giving all of my energy to other people, to giving statements, to doing this, to doing that, I was giving away everything that I actually really needed to just keep for myself. So the more that I've kept that for myself, the better my life has become, the more empowered I've become, the less I need validation or belief from anybody else believing my story or not believing my story. I don't care if you believe me or not. That's up to you, and other people's opinion is up to them. You can have it. Everyone can have their own opinion. What I do know now is it doesn't affect me. And that for me is triumph. For me.
Everyone can have their own opinion, but they don't get to have their own facts. And you know the facts of what happened to you as a survivor, and nobody else's opinion changes reality. Reality exists whether somebody is a knuckle dragon troglodyte or they just have an ideological lens that they're applying to somebody else's situation for whatever reason. Justice for me is throwing thousands upon thousands of hours into advocacy work for other survivors, making sure that they're getting the resources they need, making sure they understand that it's not their fault, giving them another voice, reassuring them that it's okay to not be okay with what happened and that other people don't get a vote on that.
True and false. I think the intention was for them to protect survivors as they believed a survivor should present themselves, i.e. there was an I don't know what it's like now, but you know, this is 20 years ago for me, more than 20 years ago. It seemed to me that in order to be the perfect victim, you had to present in a textbook fashion. And that just isn't reality. So they had framed what a person who had been assaulted or been abused, they fit in this box, and if you present in this box and you behave yourself and you do this and you nod here and you tick here, then you stand a chance of getting some justice. Now obviously I know things have changed and awareness has changed, but that was just my story back then. And if you didn't fit, then chances are you weren't going to get the box ticked. So I think their intention was to support survivors and victims, but you had to fit in this nice, neat little box. And when people have been assaulted and abused, they're traumatized, they're overwhelmed, they're not able to show up in a neat, tidy box. That's just not how it works. So the system doesn't work.
I'm also true and false on that. Some aspects of the system have been changed over time to reach out and make things better for survivors, but so much of it exists to serve the attorneys on each side of a case, to make their lives easier and simpler, and less of it is about what the survivor needs during the process. Even down to the point where, like the point Emma was making, where you have to be the absolute perfect victim, you have to fit into this box. Otherwise, we're not going forward with your case because we can't win. Because it's about winning, it's not about justice.
The truth is, to me, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I have any great nuggets of wisdom in this area. All I can say is, all I can draw on is my own experience of being in a courtroom, in the stand, being cross-examined and having my whole being just torn apart in front of a room full of people, in front of the very person that had assaulted me. I think maybe if he wasn't in the room, that would have been a good start, would have helped me, because it just felt, not only was he there, and he was just there smirking and smiling, and it was just horrendous. So I think when you've been through something, yeah, to not have to be pulled apart and in front of the very person that's pulled you apart would be a good start. I don't have any other nuggets of wisdom other than that, other than just my own experience. So I'll pass to James.
I never saw the inside of a courtroom, so I can only talk about what I've heard and how I've helped other survivors when they've told me what they went through. And I think one of the biggest things that needs to happen is a reform in the conduct of attorneys in the courtroom and the way that they're allowed to treat survivors. Things that should be off limits should remain off limits. There shouldn't be backdoors and weird ways to bring it in. And if that does happen and a survivor's rights are violated, or they are treated horribly, there needs to be real, harsh, lasting consequences for the attorney involved. And it should also be something that gets up to the Bar Association where they actually pay a penalty for it.
Yeah, for me, obviously having gone through the legal system and not received justice, I now look back and realise I did have the option to request a retrial for the reasons that James has said, that there were things that were brought into that courtroom that were absolutely nothing to do with the incident. They were things that had taken place a year and a half after the incident. They had no bearing on that night. But as James rightly says, it's enough to put the jury's mind into doubt, and you can't take it back. A jury can't unhear it, unfortunately, and it does taint the witness, and they're very sneaky in how they do it. So I think I would go back to my younger self and request that retrial. It's too late now. I did phone, and the evidence is, it's before anything was digital and all of that, so they don't even have a digital record of it. They'd have to go into a vault somewhere and find it. So yeah, I probably would go back and advise myself to go again with a fresh jury, because I did have enough evidence. So yeah, to be aware that when you go into court, that people can and will try and get things in that are inflammatory, defamatory about you, to call your witness character into question, to throw the jury. And unfortunately, once the jury hears it, they can't unhear it, even though they've been asked to discount it. Everyone's human, and I just don't think you can. So yeah, stand up for yourself. I would have told my younger self to go again, although I don't think I had the energy at the time, but I should have done, because I probably did have good chance at getting some justice. But in the absence of getting that justice, you have to go inward. You have to find support. You have to find your tribe, like Survivor Tribe. You have to find your tribe who will hear you, who will hold space for you, and do your own work and put your energy into healing you, because that's where my greatest strength has come from, despite the fact I didn't get justice at the time.
I'd like to tell survivors that even if you didn't get inside a courtroom, or if you did and you didn't get justice, what that court had to say doesn't determine reality. It just decides whether that group of people agreed that this person did what they're accused of. That doesn't mean they didn't do it. That just means it wasn't proven for whatever reason. And there's a lot of people on the internet who have a lot of stupid opinions about he's not a rapist unless he's convicted of it. No, he's still a rapist. She's still a rapist. They're still a rapist. They just weren't convicted. There's a difference between guilt being assigned in a courtroom and actually having committed the act. And people who willfully pretend that they don't know the difference are not your friend. They're not there to support you, and you need to cut them out of your life, because you don't need that kind of negative energy around you where they're making apologies for the perpetrators. You're more valuable than that. You have a right to surround yourself with people who support you, and people who are there for you, and people who are not there to be the protectors of perpetrators.
Hi, my name's Emma, and I'm a survivor.
Hello, my name is James, and I am a survivor.